Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Sunday, and I want to go back to start this. I want to go back to yesterday's European model, which of course everybody knows what it did, where it had made this sort of big storm along the East Coast, and then the day run came in, and instead of having a deep storm there, it had a much weaker low coming out of the Southwest, going into north central Pennsylvania, and also the fact that the upper air was different. And one of the things that we know in any long range look that we take it, that we see and we watch, is that we can't take each model run literally, especially as we go out further in time, because there are going to be adjustments. The longer in time we go out, the more variability there's going to be. And we're still at that point. And what's happened since yesterday is that this profile of what's going on in the upper atmosphere seems to be evolving into something different. The European, and to a lesser extent, the GFS last night showed this, but now the day run GFS has come in and is sort of, caught on to the idea. So let's review what this idea is going to be. First off, we're going to start off with this is the European from last night, and we're into tomorrow, so we know that this is going to be pretty much the truth here in terms of what it's laying out. And we've got this ridge in the east, and you've got the trough off the east coast and the trough along the west coast. So there's no surprise here. The core of the cold air that's overhead now is going to pull out. And by the way, really fast, and you can see here on this surface map how we've got temperatures in the teens and 20s across the Northeast and near 30 now as we head into the midday hour. But you can see the warmer air that's building up out to the west, with temperatures in the 50s and even some 60s beginning to show up in Illinois and Iowa. And you've got temperatures above freezing all the way up into Wisconsin and into upper Michigan. And 40s are already back into the Ohio Valley, and 50s into Kentucky. So, the process of the warming is underway. It's a matter of getting this high to move out and the next low to move along. But we'll go back to the European, and here we have that weather system for Tuesday that's going to bring a front through. Now, here's where things have changed, and we are now going into next weekend. And one of the things that the European did last night was that there's been this argument about whether the trough in the west was going to dive down into the southwest and the ridge was going to build back in the east. And even though you had this blocking high up to the north, it really wouldn't have made a difference. It's kind of showing, was kind of profiling that the pattern was going to be the same as it's been for a while. But there's a difference today. And here's what the difference is. You've got this, whoops, let me just set this up so we can. So here's the difference today. So you've got this blocking to the north, and it's fairly strong on the European. You have a trapped vortex in Hudson's Bay. So now you've got this kind of westerly flow that is moving across the country. So rather than have the trough drop all the way down, it only drops down so far. So one of the keys will be whether there is going to be enough lower pressures off the New England coast in order to keep the ridge from flying up. And last night's European, to some degree, actually to a large degree, said that this may very well be the case. It does bring through, and you can kind of see it here, right there. This is now Sunday evening, that there's a short wave that has already moved offshore. So we've got that there, and you've still got this, westerly flow, and here's your block that's up to the north. So we're all locked in over there. But this short wave, if we go back 24 hours before, you can kind of pick it up. It's very hard to find, but it's there. But it does have it, and it does move it along. And because of the fact that you have this semblance of blocking going on, the short wave gets ejected east rather than lifting up northeast. So what you wind up with is some kind of low, and you'll take a look on the surface map here, which we'll put up. The European last night, and we'll go close up so you can see it well. Here's your surface, and this is for Saturday night. So it had high pressure sitting up to the north, and a series of waves on a frontal zone going out to the south. So this would keep things cold in the Northeast, so that it would become more of a question of how far north would precip get. And the European did actually produce some 3 to 6 and 6 to 9 inch snows last night on the snow maps in this particular area here. Now, this would be, by the way, something that would be different from this winter, because up until now, everything has been, pretty much from north central New Jersey northward, north of Route 78. Instead, this is doing something anomalous or different by that's probably the better word, in that it's trying to show it further south. So this was the first clue that things were not going to be what they seemed to be yesterday. And I'm looking at today's GFS run, which very much lines up with the European model run, in that it builds this cold high in the north, and it takes a wave, a nice little wave that comes across from St. Louis to northern West Virginia to off the Maryland coast, and with it an area of snow. And this would be for late next Saturday night into Sunday morning, if this is correct. And I think there's still some variability here to deal with in terms of how this plays out, because it's still a week away. And then out it goes. And then we have the next weather system. This is for Monday into Tuesday. Now, here's where the GFS now is wanting to take another strong low up into the western lakes. So we'll have to see, how much reality there is of along those lines. So it's coming out evolving differently than what we originally saw. And here's the wider view. And so we'll take it out on the wider view. First off, so here's our system for Tuesday. There's going to be some showers and thunderstorms with that. I think the severe weather is going to be confined to southern areas across maybe from Tennessee down into Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And then the front passes through. This is not going to be a severe weather threat for the Northeast. I think this is just going to be, the Mid-Atlantic. It's probably just going to be showers and maybe the occasional isolated thunderstorm. And you see how wrapped up this low gets up into in Canada near Hudson Bay. It gets down, the pressures get very low, down to 975. And we've got action going on as the next weather system in that Pacific trough comes into the northwest. So here's the evolution of two waves. Here's one for Friday, which goes by to our north as this big cold high begins to build in. So this actually produces some pretty decent snows throughout upstate New York and into New England, or at least a shot of snow anyway. And then that goes out, and then here comes the second wave, and this is for Saturday night into Sunday. And I would suggest, by the way, that one of the things that may wind up happening in this is that the subsequent model runs may actually wind up being a little colder. So we'll have to see if that's the case. It may not necessarily be the case for this first wave, but I think it might very well be the case for the second wave. And you can see it's got a nice little area of snow with that. Look at what's going on in the west too. Because of that broad westerly flow, you're bringing in weather systems a little further south and getting the Pacific Northwest into the cold air later next week. So you have some snows going on through Oregon and Idaho and into Northern California. This system comes out, a pretty good chunk of it comes out and makes for a large-sized storm going into the western Great Lakes for now we're at Tuesday, March 14th on this particular new model run with cold air behind it. So I think we have an interesting situation that's developing for later this week. It's not going to come out the way the European had it yesterday, but it is coming out differently. And I suspect that we may wind up seeing a few more subtle changes in this, but it's at least encouraging from a forecast standpoint in terms of trying to gain some confidence in the forecast that you're seeing a little bit of continuity now with the models. You're not seeing one model having a ridge in the east and a trough in the west, and then another model having a trough in the east and a ridge in the west. They pretty much are kind of in sync, and you can see the colder broad flow on this close-up upper air, that's coming across the United States. And there's weather systems that are kind of embedded along in that flow that are going to be moving along. So this is different from what we saw. And of course, the fact that we have cold air, some cold air coming down into the Northeast is important here, even though there might be some more troughing that wants to happen in the West. And you can see as we go into the latter part of the period, the trough in the West does come down, and that forces up the ridge to build in the East. And again, now we're into the week of March 13th. So that's why it's doing what it's doing in terms of making a big storm. One of the keys in this blocking pattern that we have is, what's out in the Atlantic is very important, because here we are for next weekend, for Saturday, and the fact that we have on the GFS, this is the feature that's really critical to keeping the ridge in the east from flying up too quickly. It holds the ridge down. You have a low out at 50 north, 50 west. Here's your block to the north, and there's your flow coming out from the west. So even though you do have that Pacific trough, the presence of this 50-50 low is very important because it keeps it colder. Now, eventually what happens is late next weekend and early next week, that low pulls out. So you see what happens once it pulls out, the ridge builds back up in the east, and now we get this trough that tries to drop into the west, but you get something that gets ejected to the east, and this is what makes the big storm in the Great Lakes. So the presence of, for the lead system, for the systems for late this week and this weekend, this is the critical element, is that low that's east of New England. If long as it's there and it's intense enough, the ridge can't come up, and you've got the block. So that's the other element. So then you just watch to see what comes out of the west. You'll just get weather systems that'll start coming out of the west, and they'll tend to move more east than northeast or north-northeast. So I think that we see, in my view, I think that the models are now beginning to key on the possibility that there could be some sort of snow threat for next weekend, and probably not for the first weather system, but I don't want to completely discount it. And when we look at the snowfall, so I'll show you what the kind of snowfall this produces, and we'll go to the northeastern part of the United States. Here's a close-up of that. That's my friend Alan Casper, weatherman for New York, New Jersey 101.5 for many, many years. And those of you who are in the New York area that have been around as long as I have know exactly who he is. A great forecaster indeed. You can see the close-up view here of how it handles that wave coming out into West Virginia and then off the Maryland coast. So it keeps it actually mostly snow for areas from central New Jersey on northward. And in terms of snowfall forecasts, if we take a look at the total snowfall, it actually is quite bullish with that. Here's the first one. You can see most of that is to the north. So this is the one for Thursday night into Friday. And then we have the second one that adds to that. And it actually produces a solid area of 6 to 8 inches from central New Jersey, southern areas of central New Jersey, on up through northern New Jersey, Long Island, on up through eastern Pennsylvania. Pretty wide area. So the question, I think, I'll break it even down further. We'll go to the 24-hour snowfall, and you can see how it just breaks down so we can separate out the weather system. So here's the first one, which brings some snowfall to upstate New York, and here's the second one, which comes in right behind it for next weekend. So that is what we're seeing right now in terms of the weather models. I will cut a European video later this afternoon as soon as that comes out, and we can evaluate how it compares to the GFS and take a look at all of this going forward. Weather posts on meteorologistjoechaffee.com and weatherlongisland.com, and you can catch my friend Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com. And of course, you can download my app and subscribe to my forecasts. That's just $1 a month on Google Play for Android, and on iTunes for iPhones. You'll get my forecast, my written forecast and analysis for the New York City, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley, and eastern Pennsylvania areas. Everybody have a great Sunday, and we'll check in back a little later when the European is done.